welcome back to another episode of Chatterbox with me, Mel Biggs. This is the podcast where every month I get to sit down with a Melodeon player from across Europe and the world, and I get to interview them to find out more about the person behind the music. This month my guest is the fantastic Katie Howson. She's based in East Anglia, but as we soon get to find out, she has travelled around a little bit in the UK and even visited Ireland on multiple occasions. She takes her influences from both of those cultures, and there's a lot of detail that we go into later on in the podcast, and I'm really proud of this conversation. I think it's a real treasure that we have here as part of the series, and we get to talk about some things that haven't been talked about before. So please make sure you listen to the end of the podcast to find out more about what we get into. For anyone watching the video version of this on YouTube, just to let you know, there's a couple of moments where Katie's camera drops out for some reason, but it always comes back. I really hope you enjoy it, and I won't delay you any longer. Here she is, Katie Howson. Katie, I'm really glad that you're here. As I was just saying off camera, it's been a while. You've been on my list for a long time, and I'm really glad that the day is finally here that I get to chat to you and get to know you better and introduce you to the listenership as well. I'd love to start off, as I always do, my general pattern is getting to know how you got into the instrument and traditional music, traditional dance. Take us all the way back and talk to us about this, because it seems that you've got a bit of an unorthodox way in. So you've alluded in your email, so I'm curious to know.
Yeah, I didn't really have, I hardly had any musical education at all. A few tootles on the recorder, age 7, and an idea of what the tadpoles on the lines meant, and that was it. Then when I got to secondary school, if you didn't fit in somehow with the singing teacher, then that was it. And I remember being sent on an errand. Would I put a note in the music, take a note to the music teacher in the music room? I didn't know there was a music room in the school.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I went in there and there was nobody there, and there was a lot of instruments in there, and I was just like, wow, this is being denied me. This shows you, some people in the audience might realise how long ago this is, but at the time there was a band called Cream, Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce, and they had a song out called The Sunshine of Your Love. And I walked up to this, I put the note on the table and I walked up to the double bass, and now I realise that probably the opening bars of The Sunshine of Your Love must be on open strings on a double bass, but I didn't know that then. I just went ping, 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 and out came the start of this tune, and I just went, wow. And that's a very long time ago, a really long time ago, over 50 years ago. And the fact that I still remember it, I think, really made me feel that you didn't have to read music, you didn't have to take lessons, you didn't have to fit into the orthodox music teaching, which of course was, classical stuff at school, in order to be able to make music. So I do think that kind of sat in the brain for a lot of years, and then came out again. There's nobody in my family played an instrument. We did. No, that's not quite true. We did have a piano in the house, and I forgot. I did have some piano lessons, but I think maybe that was about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3.
Oh, really? Just like a little tiny taste, and thought, no, this isn't for me.
I just couldn't bear that formal teaching. It just didn't suit me at all. So the piano stood unplayed by anybody, and nobody was interested in folk music or traditional music. My mum was a big Frank Sinatra fan, and I came up through pop music and then into listening to folk music with Fairport Convention and people like that early on. And then I fell in with some friends who liked the Watersons and went to university, and then discovered proper folk music when I got to sort of 17, 18 years old. So previous to that, I'd really got no musical background at all.
What era are we talking about here when you were at university? I'm just curious as to know, was this like the big revival era with, things coming out on the mainstream radios and things? Or...
I don't remember having a radio at university. I had a record player. It was in the mid-70s. And then I just fell in love with the sound of the Melodeon, really. I was Morris dancing, not one of the very first women's teams, but one of the pretty early ones in the mid-70s.
What side was that?
It's a Lancaster University side called Red Rose Morris. Yeah, somebody from there lent me a Melodeon to see if I could get a tune out of it because I like the sound so much, and I got Young Collins or something out of it. And then anybody who's in the audience who's heard me talk about this before will know that this next bit of the story. This how I came across my first Melodeon was I was on a bus going into Lancaster town from the university, and it was pouring with rain, and the bus stopped at a bus stop by an antique shop, and I just wiped the misty windows of the bus and looked into this antique shop window and thought, I think that's a Melodeon. Of course, it was a really old, Saxony made one, about 1910 or something. So I jumped off and went in and had a look at it, and it was £9.
Wow.
And I couldn't afford £9. So I saw one of the people I knew up there at university was Nick Barber. Of course, a lot of people will know Nick Barber as a fabulous Melodeon player in those days. He played piano accordion, I hesitate to say. But he and Mary were great, and they ran the University Folk Dance Society. And Nick said to me, if you want to buy it, I'll go halves with you. So he lent me £4.50, and I bought the Melodeon. It was a little old one row, and I used to have to spend as much time sort of fixing the pallets and levers as I did actually playing it. So fairly quickly, once I realised I liked it and I could get on with it, I fairly quickly bought a Hohner 2-row then.
So were you just sort of playing it with the Morris at this stage, or were you listening to bands? And I mean, who was your kind of, when you said you liked the sound of the Melodeon, was that just from Morris, or was this other bands you were listening to?
Hard to say really, but I didn't actually play for the Morris. I danced, and by the time I could play well enough, I'd moved away from there. But one thing, I was listening to the old Swan Band record that had come out, and the one house I lived in as a student, the guy below me had got a copy of the first album by William Kimber, the concertina player.
Yeah.
And I remember lying in my room and hearing this sound and thinking, oh, I wonder what that is, and going down and asking him. So I listened to not just Melodeon players, obviously, but English music, and right from the early days as well. I was very interested in Irish instrumental music as well, but I didn't really play that for a long time. So it was definitely English stuff that started me off. Yeah.
Having talked to Martin Ellison, who is up in that neck of the woods, he spoke a lot about the Irish influence on him, because there were a lot of workers that came over and working in the in the industries and stuff where he was. Is that where you also heard this music, or where was that sort of Western influence on you from Ireland?
There was one or two good Irish players in Lancaster, certainly, but it was mainly through recordings at that point, early on. And in fact, jumping forward many years, after John and I got married, John was from Liverpool and he used to go over to Ireland regularly. And it took me quite a lot of years to persuade him to go back again, because I was desperate to go. And he kept going, oh no, let's go somewhere else. I've been to Ireland loads of times. But it took me quite a lot of years to actually get over there and meet Irish musicians in Ireland. That's nothing on several decades.
Definitely want to talk about that, but let's fill in a few gaps here. So you went to university. When did you were you from East Anglia originally? I know that's where you've kind of made a home, and you do a lot of research on the music there, and you played with a lot of traditional musicians from East Anglia, but how did that connection come about? Well,
it was neither of us had any connection to East Anglia. I was born in Essex, but when I say Essex, I was born in Ilford, so that barely counts as Essex. But if I want to be an Essex girl, I can be. So it was the music that drew us. John and I got together, and I was finishing Teach Training College. John was in teaching at the time, in his second career. So I was at a point where I was going to have to settle somewhere, and John fancied a change as well. So we decided we would go somewhere in the country. It was the 1970s. So dreams of self-sufficiency, which I've always had a really tiny garden, so that never happened. But also somewhere with some music. So we considered, I applied for a teaching job just outside Cricklade, which is where Rod and Danny Stradling lived at the time. And Rod was, the founder member of the Old Swan Band, so... and I knew him by that point, so that would have been an attraction to move to that area. And John applied for jobs in Norfolk, which didn't work out. got a clash of interviews, and Suffolk, because we knew the music, we knew the traditional music, largely through recordings on the Topic recording label, and through Keith Summers' book Sing, Say and Pay, which was full of just sort of anecdotes really about the musicians. So it was that drew us to Suffolk, very definitely. But we neither of us drove when we got here. Didn't realise
how rural it was.
How rural it was, exactly. I mean, there was a bit of a bus service in those days, but they weren't going to the places we wanted to go to.
Yeah. So was that the first port of call? Did you both land teaching jobs in Suffolk, and then obviously need to get around for work? And
John landed a teaching job just down the road from here, about 2.5 miles away, and he used to cycle. And I short while afterwards, I got a teaching job, and I managed to get lifts there. And at one point, I did have a moped, but that was.
Gosh, yeah, take your life in your hands on the lane.
My life, yes, I didn't enjoy that. So it was a priority to learn to drive it. And then once we'd learned to drive, we used to go out and pick up people like Fred Whiting, who was a fiddle player who lived about 15-20 miles away, and take him out to pubs and things. He used to give us directions on how to get around, including when to change gear. Turn left here, and you might want to change down to second gear. So that's, once we got a car, we were able to meet a lot more people, obviously.
Yeah. How was it? I mean, Fred Whiting, I would admit, is a name I've not come across, because I'm not a history buff, and I don't spend enough time researching the people who have been before me. I very much live in the moment with it, which is, an admission, and I feel a bit squirmy about it. But were there still many of the old men, the old women, the kind of traditional players that were sat in the pubs that you met? I'm assuming Fred was one of them. I know that you've mentioned Oscar Woods and Dolly Curtis as well, and many other names. Are they all people that you were meeting as you kind of got used to the area and got to know people?
Yeah, absolutely. There were quite a number around still. There was a lovely singer and fiddle player called Harky Nesling, whose favourite song was "Come and Be My Little Teddy Bear," for traditional. And he died 2 weeks before we moved here, so he was the one person that I really felt we missed. But we did meet people that had already been recorded, people like Keith Summers had made recordings of Dolly Curtis, for instance. Oscar Woods had been recorded some years before. So we did meet all those people, but we also went out and, particularly John, went out and investigated and found many more people who'd never been recorded before. And then he eventually set up a recording label called Vintage in the first instance, and then Veteran initially to issue recordings of those people. So some of the people who we were playing with, we set up a informal group. We called it a concert party because you never quite knew who was going to be in it, really. There was always me and John, who played the banjo, and Reg Reed, who played the dulcimer. We were the heart of it, and then there might have been another 3 or 4, 5, 6, depending on where we were going, singers, step dancers, musicians, and we'd play some tunes together and do individual things as well, all based around the local repertoire from Suffolk and Norfolk. And I live in Suffolk and I've been based in Suffolk, but we've always spent a lot of time with like Billy Bennington, who was a dulcimer player from Norfolk, who spent a lot of time with. So Suffolk and Norfolk have come into that. So we were kind of putting the music back out there by performance, and also John was doing the same thing by recording as well. So we were on a bit of a mission, really, to make sure that music was shared more widely. And also, I think, a lot of those old boys like Cyril Barber, old boys, Suffolk term. I think I'm an old boy now. I'm older than a lot of those people when I first met them. But people like Cyril Barber said, you're giving us a new lease of life, because they'd played in their young days, and then nobody had been interested in it. Jukeboxes came in and all the rest of it. And to find younger people, as we were in those days, who were interested in that old music, was exciting and fulfilling for a lot of those older generation people.
So when you landed in Suffolk, were you ready to go, up and running as a box player, you know, very kind of capable musician by this point, I imagine. And then you were able to kind of go out and join in the sessions, get to know the scene, and start the.
I'd only been playing only a year, no, 2 years, a couple of years maybe, and I didn't really play out a great deal until I came to Suffolk. I remember the first big, that lots of people will be able to remember the first time they ever played in public. I was in a pub on the Dock Road in Liverpool called Oily Joe's. It was slightly more salubrious than it sounds, but I can still remember that. Oh my God, am I really going to play in public, So that wasn't that long before we moved. So I wasn't, no, I think I was quite open, a bit like a sponge, really open to soaking up the influences, which was all you could do in company with, say, Oscar Woods, because he never discussed what he was playing or gave you any tips or anything. You just sat there and played with him and picked up, just absorbed it really. There was, I say, no discussion about it at all. In those days there was obviously no internet, but there was no lessons to be had. Just wasn't that culture of teaching instruments. I was operating largely outside the folk scene at the time, but even within the folk scene there wasn't that culture at the time either. So it was really make your own way.
Yeah, sit and listen and just play along and learn through osmosis and observation.
And the weird thing with Oscar is, I didn't know him for that long, about 6 years, I suppose, before he died. And some years after he died, I met somebody, a concertina player, who had played with him before my time. So I can't think of the guy's name now, but we'd never met before. The two of us never met. But we'd both had time playing with Oscar. And we sat down and played some tunes together, and it just made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. It was like Oscar was in the room with you. It was just, our phrasing was so similar, and we both just kind of stopped and went, oh, that's quite interesting, isn't it? We obviously, picked up a lot from him that you couldn't verbalise really what it was, but it was there.
Yeah. I just have a little story on that feeling. In my early days, I did a lot of playing with Jim and Hannes, who is a player with, I think, the name's gone, Lassington Oak. Editor here, just jumping in with a little miniature correction that whilst Jim does still play for Lassington Oak occasionally, he's mostly playing with Mizzerdon Morris these days. And I'm sure he's played with other Gloucestershire area Morris sides over the years. Fun fact is that members of Mizzerdon recently were in the film Mother's Pride. I don't think Jim made it into the cut, but just wanted to get that in there as well because it's pretty cool. Now back to the interview. Deb Hannes's dad, for anyone that knows Deb, beautiful voice on the scene. And yes, I used to spend lots of time with him in sessions at Cheltenham Folk Festival, along with Chris and... I forget his name, Glyn, the fiddle player. I always remember sort of sat there playing along with them. And I used to spend a lot of time just watching Jim, sat right next to him, watching his left hand. Even when he lost his fingers, bless his heart, he had to go away and relearn how to play, but he came back and, still had all of that groove. And it was the way that he used the bellows and the lift in the instrument. So I absorbed all of that, but, unknowingly. And just a couple of years ago, I was reintroduced to playing with him again, which was glorious in itself. But there was a kind of house party that was put together with a friend and mutual friends. And I was again sat on his left hand. And I suddenly clicked and realised that exact same thing of, God, I sound like Jim. But it was that thing of, well, I'm me now, but there's so much of Jim in what I do. And I just thought how lovely that is. And I said it to him and he was really, taken aback and... but I said, well, no, I spent years sat on your left hand, every February for all day of Cheltenham Folk Festival, but that was hours and hours of playing.
Lovely to be able to say that back to them, isn't it?
I
say that to Oscar. And the other thing that's happened more recently is that Rod Stradling, who was the Melodeon player with Old Swan Band and lots of other things in between, and I haven't seen that much of Rod in the last few years, but in my early days, played a lot with him over a lot of years, really. And of course, he died at the end of last year. And I was at a music weekend in January where it was actually it started on the day of his funeral, which I hadn't been able to get to, some people had. So we had a bit of in the evening session, everybody was coming out with tunes that they associated with Rod. Not in any, nobody really said very much, but we all knew, oh yeah, that's a set Rod played, and so on. So we were all kind of acknowledging his influence on us. And I don't know how to say this without sounding kind of maudlin about it really, but it wasn't that I felt his presence there, but I suddenly realised how much I'd absorbed that wasn't just tunes from him. It was about the energy that he played with, and I just suddenly thought, do you know what? I've never thought about this before really, but I do play. There's something of the same energy that Rod used to have playing that I've got through all those years of playing with him. And I thought that's a legacy that's really special. You can't kind of go around.
No, but that will have...
this from Rod. But people do have a big influence on you if you spend a lot of time playing with them, as you say.
And it's intricately woven into what you do and who you are, as other, as Oscar's influences and the layers of influences. But you will have also had those influences on the people that have sat next to you and played next to you for years. So Rod goes on, Oscar goes on. And I just want to sort of say here, because we are a few days after hearing the very sad news of Dave Shepherd passing away, another very famous Suffolk musician, whose legacy is global, I believe, and, such an influence on me in those formative years, and mainly for French dance and that sort of style, but fantastic English fiddler. And I kind of reflected over the weekend when I heard that news and thought about what of Dave is in me, because I haven't had that many hours next to him, but what I have had and the recordings I had when I used to obsessively listen back over my session recordings, that really, his gut strings, and he used to play, I think it was cello rosin he used for his fiddle. He liked a really sticky, kind of gritty sound, and that for me felt like something percussive that I could really nail into for Melodeon playing. So yeah, I just think that those layers of influence, they live on, and that's actually the special thing, isn't it, for traditional music, is that if you've had the honour and privilege of sharing that. And it's not just the music, but it's the socialising, it's the drinking, it's the party games, it's all of it, isn't it? And, all of that gets passed on and handed down.
I mean, I think that's what's so special about traditional music for me, really, is that because I learned and play orally, and I just think you get that when it's an oral tradition to me. I can't access written music very easily. And what I love about learning things orally is that you've got the different versions, because you can kind of feel the imprints of lots of different people on those tunes, not just the person you've learned it from, but one of the tunes we're going to look at in the Melinar is usually called Oscar Wood's Jig, but Oscar called it Tiger Smith's Jig, and now I've changed it, so somebody should really be calling it Katie Howson's Jig. We've all put our own imprints on that tune, and then somebody else takes it on and puts their own imprints on it. And I think that's great to me. My personal opinion is a tune on a page is like pinning a butterfly into a museum case, and for me the music is the butterfly flying through the air and picking out all the different.
Yeah, no, I like that image.
I think
it's always quite a clinical way when you write something down, it defines it. And I find generally there has been an opinion that floats around, as educators we hear it, people will have opinions about, well, you're not playing it right because that's not what I read in this book or on this website. And I think that if people are open-minded, they can be persuaded to see other versions of things and then understand that that's what traditional music also houses, is everyone's interpretation of the material and the source material, and it evolves. It's a natural thing. Chinese whispers, things get passed on and changed. But I think for me, as an educator, yes, I use sheet music, of course I do, but I absolutely spend most of my time teaching and training people to feel confident with learning by ear and what that is in the breakdown. And I've got online courses and all sorts of things that I've meticulously designed to try and make that as simple as possible, because for some people it's really not, and it's quite an overwhelming, impossible task. But there's always proof that any information can be passed on visually through watching what I'm doing. Can you see what my body's doing to make this sound happen? And I've just taken the way that I teach is how I've learnt, by sitting for hours in pubs with blokes and women and all sorts of people and just obsessively watching them and obviously listening to them. But, you know, the visual of what I see really enhances the music, because then I know if that fiddle bow is moving in this way, then maybe the bellows in me can move in this way. So I'm always looking for how other instrumentalists are interpreting things, and then, you know, and as well as that, chord sequences and more kind of like musical things. But I think a lot of my stylistics have come from being a dance musician, playing for dance, but also playing in pubs with dance musicians, and sort of having that jovial physicality of the music kind of like in front of me so much.
Definitely.
That's really important. Just interrupting this conversation to let you know that if you sign up to my Patreon, you can get the extended episode here. And this month you'll get a lot more Melodeon geekery, but every single episode with my guest tutors, there will be an extended episode available with your membership to Mel's Angels. But not only the extended podcasts, you'll also get access, if you sign up to the tier that gives it, access to the Melinar tutorials, which we've been talking about already. Every guest tutor provides a tutorial, so you get a chance to learn something from them, and I've got loads of my own ones on there as well. The archive has been running since March 2020, and there is literally hundreds of tutorials to choose from and little series that I've put together, so it's really easy to find your way around. If you sign up, your money will go directly to me to support my work online, and it will also help to me to pay my guest tutors to give their wonderful tuition as well. Thank you to everybody who does sign up to my Patreon. You're absolutely so wonderful, and I really couldn't do any of this without you, so thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who's active in my WhatsApp community as well. My Mel's Angels Sharing Sunday is always popping off, with everyone sharing their progress on things they've been working on and just like fun stuff, and it's a really lovely supportive place to be. Check out the link in the description if you'd like to sign up, and check out my Patreon. There's a 7-day free trial to the Archangel Plus tier, and that's where you're going to get everything that I've mentioned. Now back to the interview. Where did the Irish influence start to kind of grab you? And, you know, you said that you've already spent a lot of time in Ireland with John and things like that, but where and who did you meet out there? Where were you going back to? Who were you learning from and playing with?
So when I was listening to the early Topic recordings of English musicians, Topic had also issued a set of albums called Music from Ceilidh, which is the borders of sort of North Cork, East Kerry and West Limerick, where they meet. So it's not you won't find Ceilidh on a map. It's a cultural area rather than a geographical area. And there were 6 albums, or the 5 out of 6, I can't remember. Anyway, I'd listened to a lot of those, and there's lots of polkas and slides on there, very accessible to somebody brought up in an English tradition, let's say. I mean, I hardly play any reels or anything. I'm not. That's not my sort of music. So it was very much the music of the west of Ireland that attracted me from recordings. And when we moved to Suffolk, almost exactly the same time, somebody moved to Norfolk, but only just over the border, about 20 miles away from me. A fiddle player called Julia Clifford, who was on one of these records, or on several of them, actually. And so we used to go to some quite weird and wonderful events where they would be very old-fashioned people in amongst a load of hippies, sort of these alternative fairs that used to happen in Suffolk. I mean, loads of people played more with Julia and her husband than I did at the time. I was, you know, the East Anglian style English music was my main interest, but I was always fascinated by Julia personally as well. She was a woman playing on her own, which was fairly unusual. Her husband died a few years after she moved up here, and she was a great character as well. So and right back, I think on my I'm not sure my earliest recordings, but some of the Old Hat Dance Band, 1990 something or other, I can't remember. There were tunes there from the Ceilidh tradition, which I would have learned from Julia. So that's going back almost as far as my English influences, really. When we started going over to Ireland, we went on a couple of sort of road trips and fell in with a lot of people in County Clare, where the music's quite different.
Yeah.
It's still, it is still quite regional over there. So I spent a lot of time going backwards and forwards to County Clare, actually, because the people that I knew there, and I wouldn't, to begin, well, a lot of the time I wouldn't really play very much over there. But it so happened that the year the Euro was introduced, whatever year that was, same year, a Melodeon player who'd been on those recordings called Jackie Daly, who's quite well known, moved to just outside Milltown Malbay in Clare, which was the place that we used to go to regularly. So I remember we were sharing a house with some other people, and this friend said to us, "Oh, I've invited Jackie round for dinner tonight." I'm like, okay, Jackie Daly. I'm like, what? I sat next to him at dinner. I was like, what? He's from Dodannon and Patrick Street and things, and one of my big heroes musically. Wow. And I was sitting having dinner with him, and lots of other people. Irish sessions can be quite different. They're usually hosted by somebody, and you have to be. You don't just walk in and join in. You might take your box in, you might not do. You might be invited to join in, or you might just sit. I remember sitting in one session for 2 or 3 hours and not knowing any of the tunes, but really enjoying it. And I'd take my mouth organs with me. I play harmonica as well, and I got them in my pocket. And I sort of slightly knew the people running the session, but they'd never seen me play an instrument, and I suddenly whipped the mouth organ out and joined in with the tune. The flute player's like, what? Where did that come from? So I don't go over there thinking I'm going to be playing a lot. I go to listen, really, and if I get a chance to join in with people that I know, fine. And usually would do. Sometimes we set up our own sessions with friends, and other times we'd go and join in, other times we'd go and listen. And I've been over to Kerry and Cork quite a lot as well, obviously with the music, being the music I love, particularly coming from that area. It's the similarity in feel to English music that's drawn me to that particular sort of music, and the box that's mainly used there, not exclusively, it has that same sort of feel.
Yeah, I'd love to hear why. We've talked a lot about East Anglian music and moving there, recording, starting up a record label, and John going out and recording people. You founded East Anglian Traditional Music Trust, or EATMUT as it is familiarly known as, yourself and John. And you ran that, I think I read in your bio, was it 20 years or something? It was quite a while that you were...
17, yeah.
17, almost 20, yeah. And it was a big part of why you ended up being awarded the EFDAS Gold Badge, which is a very prestigious thing that we have here in England. Can you talk to us about your motivation to start EATMUT? It feels obvious, maybe, but there might be some things here that people aren't familiar with. And talk to us about EATMUT.
Yeah, well, so when we early days, John started recording people, and what do you do with the recordings? You want to put them out there. So he then made a cassette label. It was in the first instance, and then a record label. Well, no, never did records, CDs, and then streaming. That expanded hugely, but in initial days it was to put out the music we heard around us, the East Anglian music, and let people know about it and encourage people to play it. And then we had the Old Hat Concert Party, which was performance about this, the same different aspect of the same kind of movement to get that music out there and recognised. So the trust was the third effort to do that, I suppose.
Yeah.
And the late 1990s, we were aware that a lot of the people we'd learned from and played with and been friends with were falling off their perches and not going to be around. So we thought, we want to encourage more people to play the music and sing the songs and do the step dancing. It was always not just about the instrumental music, but about all those things. So we decided to found the East Anglian Traditional Music Trust, as we called it. It was like, do we call it Folk East, which there wasn't a festival called Folk East at the time, or something like that, or do we do a big mouthful which actually says what we do? So we went for the big mouthful. Eat meat, some people call it. Fortunate if you're vegetarian. So yeah, and before we'd founded that, I was doing some work in schools. I had been a primary school teacher, then I went part-time and did some work in the county record office, and then I took that work. During that time I did some work on folk music and history really. So I took that work out into schools. So I'd started doing quite a lot of independent schools work, which involved, it wasn't teaching music as such, it was teaching about the traditional culture and the songs and the dances that were part of that. So that was a big part of when we started the trust, of what we were doing. But we also did lots of community projects. First year we did 4 different community projects, and just trying to get people involved in their own communities doing these things. And that expanded to all sorts of other things, including the Melodeons and more, which you were guest tutor
That was
at.
my first big gig as a Melodeon tutor, actually. It was the first proper thing that I did, weekend course-wise. So, yeah, very grateful to you and John for having me on that. It was great.
Yeah. I mean, we ran those, I think, 15, 16 years.
Yeah.
So a long-running series. And I also ran Melodeon building courses, which wasn't ever part of the original
These
plan.
things just evolve, though, don't they? And they're kind of like become behemoths. So, yeah, the wonderful Emmanuel Parizel.
Yeah, Dave Townsend introduced me, one Melodians at Whitney introduced me to Emmanuel Parizel and said, Emmanuel would like to run a course building one-row Melodians. I think you should talk.
The thing is, and as soon as you meet Emmanuel, he's got such a sort of effervescent energy about him and such a vivaciousness. He's quite a difficult person to turn down, I think.
Yeah, well, I was very keen to do it. It was a really exciting project to be involved in. So I ran those, and we ran an annual traditional music day. So those were the traditional music day and Melodians and more, and a step dance day, which we kind of inherited from somebody else, were the big public events, if you like. But all along there was a lot of other community work, research, publications. We did books and exhibitions and talks and all sorts of things. So, but things by 2017, things were changing. I felt like with Melodians More, for example, there were a lot more. There's Melodeon Playgroup and things were starting up, and I felt that there was lots of other events happening around. It was harder to run it at the scale at which we had been running it, and that was only one, but there was just a change in all sorts of areas, and I felt I didn't want to carry on any more at that point. I'd rather retire, and weren't quite sure what would happen to the trust, but in fact it's continuing in a bit of a different shape. COVID came along, all sorts of other things came along between, so some of the things like the Melodians and more were casualties of all that, really, unfortunately. But there's plenty of other things going on now. So
I think Melodians and more inspired so many, and as well as Whitney, which has now sadly folded as well. But Bob Ellis, bless his soul, rest his soul. He started Melodians in Wensleydale very much off of the back of what Whitney and yourselves were doing. I think he was passionate to keep the same sort of format, and then Pete Ward and Claire at Acorn Instruments, Bellows and Buttons, they're 2 weekends that they've sort of taken the lead on. That ethos and that style, that way of running courses, that you set the foundation for that, I feel. And even the things that I run is because I saw what you and John were doing, and that was, for me, the blueprint. It's like, well,
wow.
I couldn't think of anywhere else, any way else of doing it differently, because it was just there's the blueprint. It works, and it's bloody hard work. But it's.
I think we started. Whitney was certainly before us, but not very long. I was quite surprised to see that they weren't. It was only maybe 3 or 4 years or something before we started. I think so.
Yeah.
And we took inspiration from Whitney as well. So
yeah. No, it's a shame to know that those events are just sort of memories for anyone that was lucky enough to get to go to them now. But I think that if you are going to Melodeon events, know that the forefathers and the foremothers that went before, they're very much built into the to the fabric of the other events, I think, which is nice to know, I think, for you, and hopefully a nice thing to think that you started that, and there was between you and Dave, if there was nothing before that, in terms of education, then you set the scene up for that, which I'm very grateful to you for.
I'm teaching at Bellows and Buttons in next month.
Oh, fantastic! In Ribblesdale, is that up in?
Central, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I don't know if there's any places left, but if anyone's listening, do go and check the website. I'll leave the link to that downstairs as well, because Pete's been a big supporter of mine. So yeah, if there's any spaces, go and check it out. And there'll be you and two other tutors. I think he has it, isn't it? It's like three,
Yeah,
and you get to see everybody as well. So you
that's
don't get
right.
to pick and choose. You just see
No,
everybody. And
slight variation on a theme. I like that. That's quite an interesting way to do
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. You have been playing for dance for, I don't know, how many years have you been playing for dance? The 50th year playing Melodeon, as I'm reading from your bio,
Yeah,
but
probably
quite soon after.
49 in that case.
The two go quite nicely together. Talk us through, like, obviously your bands that you've been in, the recordings, they're all out there. You're in PolkaWorks currently. Are there other bands as well that you're playing in currently?
No, not really. No, don't have a local band. Partly because, well, after COVID, things changed, and I felt like the rug had been pulled out from underneath my feet with as regards dance band work, particularly.
Yeah,
I thought, it's going to be the last thing to get back on its feet, and and then John always did the PA, and once he'd gone, there was nobody who wanted to do the PA. So I do quite miss having a local band, I must say, but I don't want to have to deal with the PA anymore.
yeah. It's the lugging it around and having a car big enough to fit it all in, and
And setting it up, setting
yeah,
it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in order to set it up and all the rest of it.
yeah.
So no, I miss playing for dancing, but I don't miss the surroundings. Well, I do still play for dancing. I still play with PolkaWorks, and I've had a little spell, rather unexpectedly, depping for somebody, for so I had a few more gigs with them, and I did do a little spell playing some Irish music for set dancing, but I don't enjoy that experience at all, I have to say. But there you go,
It's
very different,
a different world.
very different, very different.
With English Ceilidh, I mean, you've seen, as we've already mentioned, about the evolution of dance and steps and sessions and things, but the Ceilidh scene's gone through that same kind of lens, and younger influence come in and change it. What would you say? I've asked you about this before, but defines that kind of English Ceilidh style, and what is it for you that you really love about playing for dance and the repertoire that you choose? How you actually function as a band? Can you talk to us a bit about those
Yeah.
inner workings?
The very first band I had was called the Suffolk Bell and Horseshoe Band, and it was named after two corn dollies, the Suffolk Bell and the Suffolk Horseshoe. That was our logo, and that was in the early days of the English country music revival in the late 70s, and we were very keen to play lots of English music. We kind of went our separate ways a little bit because the other box player in the band, Paddy Butcher, was really keen on French music, and that's not been anything that's really ever attracted me hugely. So we went our separate ways, and
Yeah,
then we had bands which specialised in playing East Anglian stuff. Then we had the Old Hat Dance Band, which was myself, John playing banjo, Reg Reader on dulcimer. Can't remember the order that everybody joined in now. We've been playing with Ted Stevens, who'd been the percussionist with Flowers and Frolics, one of the other big English bands.
yeah.
He'd taken us to Jersey. He'd been asked if he'd got a band for Jersey Folk Festival, and he said, yes, yes, put the phone down and thought, now who shall I ask to be in my band then? So we put a band together, and I remember saying to him, Ted, they're going to ask us for a name for this band before long, and he said, oh, it's sorted out. I've sorted that. And we went, but we haven't discussed this. He said, it's all right. I said, well, what are we called? And he went, I said, just say that again. And this was a name which apparently Flowers and Frolics had rejected, and the name was Women Wrestling in Mud.
Oh my gosh.
We did once do a gig where some people demanded their money back because there wasn't any mud wrestling. But from that point onwards, Old Hat Dance Band, Barry Coop joined us on a gig on keyboards, and
Nice.
Mel Dean, who'd been with us in Women Wrestling in Mud, who was a concertina player from Albion Band and various others. And then we got Chris Wood joined us at Sidmouth one year. So there was quite a broad influence there, and Chris and Ted and I were all interested in music from Quebec at the time. Chris, of course, went on and did whole albums with Andy Cutting on Lisa and so on, with lots of Quebecois music on it. But on our early albums, there's Irish stuff and there's Quebecois stuff and all sorts of things. So always been interested in any music that works for dancing, really, that puts the, that's good to dance to. And I just love most of the bands I've been in. I've had quite a lot of melody players, really. Old dance band would have 3-4 melody players. PolkaWorks 5 melody players. So and never really been interested in arrangements as such. Only perhaps when you're recording you need to think about it a bit more. But they've always been very organic and made up of people who really listen to each other and work off each other. With PolkaWorks, it dawned on me over a number of years how much influence I have from Gareth, the piano player, particularly in PolkaWorks. Again, it's kind of absorbed by listening rather than what is it you're doing there. We do occasionally have those conversations, but generally it's we're just people who all have the same sort of feel and listen to each other and improvise from what we hear other people doing.
I think I just was reminded of, I think this was possibly before PolkaWorks, because how long have you been together? I don't feel it's been forever and a day.
2008, I think we got together.
Okay, so shortly after that then is when I was invited to come to Dave Hunt's kind of like an English country music weekend, but it wasn't. It was like off the books. It was like the party in the background is how I felt about it. What was the weekend? Where was it now?
It wasn't ever called. There were several places he ran them in, but they're in the winter, weren't they?
Yeah, and it was this big house. Yeah, that was it. And it was just a huge manor that had become like an educational centre, and we took it over for the weekend. And I felt like a real newbie on the scene. I think I'd gone to the Wantage workshops, met Floss Hedford, met Joe Freyer, and then Floss had invited me along. And I just went in with my eyes wide open, just like this total noob. And it was just these amazing, like the creme de la creme of like the English traditional scene is how I felt about it. Loads of people I'd never met, never heard of, but I knew yourself, Nina, and Fee and Joe were there, and I'd met Dave through the Morris, I think. And yeah, it was kind of just these throughout the day were I think my favourite, because it was like mini sessions, like small groups, and you could really get to know people and really listen and hear people. But then the evenings was just this like incredible cacophonous sound, but not unlike completely separate from, if there was a big pub at Sidmouth full of musicians where most of the time, depending on who's there, of course, but like they're not listening. Everyone's at like odds with each other. This was a massive room full of people that was just totally in sync with each other. And I think that was probably the first time I'd experienced that level of musicianship, that kind of, the size of it, but also a big session that was completely engaged with the whole thing, if that makes sense. Like everyone could hear each other and everyone was listening, everyone was just together having a good time, but not making it hard work. It was just like organically like vibing along. And then there were silly party games and skits and things like that, and that was very reminiscent of Morris and different things that I'd grown up with. I think I only did 1 or 2 of those events, but it was kind of eye-opening to me just to kind of see more of the scene and like people that had influenced English music, that I'd grown up with and been listening to as well.
Yeah, they're lovely. Totally informal weekends.
With incredible catering. I mean, that was the thing that Dave brought to me as well.
Yeah. PolkaWorks actually came together because it was just a weekend of sessions, wasn't it? And in the evenings there would be, on the Saturday evening, we always had an entertainment where people would do silly skits, as you say, and so on. And it was Dave's idea really to have like a pit band, and he'd asked somebody to put a band together just for that. And he asked Gareth one year, and Gareth put together basically what became PolkaWorks, and we all enjoyed ourselves so much we went, should we do that again? That's how that band came together, through one of those Saturday night parties, really.
We don't have very long left, and I know that when we were setting up this conversation, we both had shared about our realisation and acceptance of how the therapeutic nature and the well-being aspect of music is become more and more important in our lives, and also important to demonstrate that, talk about that, teach that. It certainly is a big part of me as an educator. I like to kind of include the mindful well-being aspect, physical aspect of music, because without our bodies and our minds being engaged, we make music in a different way and not necessarily how we want to. But obviously with the loss of John, such a huge, part of your life and part of your work as well, I know that we wanted to, you'd mentioned about talking about that and how we might segue into talking about that is very much up to you. But I just wanted to open a space here to talk about it and see what you wanted to say.
And I think, it's a strange thing, folk music, really, isn't it? I've spent my life playing dance music, which is, somebody once described English dance music as irrepressibly jolly. And certainly, the kind of stuff I played in Suffolk on the C box, all in C.
Major,
mostly, all major, quite upbeat, a lot of it. You might get a waltz, but it wouldn't, be a fairly upbeat sort of a waltz. So quite, in a way, quite one-dimensional and quite unemotional, which is strange because really my first love in music, I suppose, was blues, which is all about emotion. So it's taken me a long while, really, to kind of not find a way, that sounds like I was searching for it, but to let emotion into my music in a way. I think, I've always played in a very lively, dynamic way, so there's that sort of emotion in there. But I think it started really for me about 10 years ago. My mother died 10 years ago, and that's certainly the first time I can remember really needing to play music and really needing to play a different sort of music as well, not just the jolly polkas and jigs that I played for dancing to. And I had quite a complicated relationship with my mother, and I think I just needed to really process some of that. And I'm very lucky where I live in that I can sit and play in a room without disturbing neighbours or anybody else in the house. So I quite often sit down to play about 10 o'clock at night and carry on till maybe 1. I think this was probably after I'd retired. So
no school
in the mornings, keep musicians' hours. And I just really found that playing different style of music, different type of music.
Can you remember anything particularly that you were drawn to at that time?
Slower things, and I actually found a list from that period, and I looked at it and I went, I don't play any of these tunes anymore. So I'm not sure I ever played them out. They fulfilled a very private function for me at the time, of a different mood really, and I would work away. There's a couple of waltzes I played, which they're Australian waltzes, but they were quite somber kind of tunes, I suppose, really. And I would work away at them and mould them into something, and then nobody ever heard them. So, but one of the things I found, this is a Katie Howson theory of therapeutic folk music coming up now.
Go for it. I'm all in.
I think obviously we get lots of people listen to music for emotional reasons. We're very lucky if we play an instrument that we've got a way of expressing our emotions through playing music, but we're not playing sonatas and concertos and long complicated things. We're playing simple pieces of music, 32 bars long, maybe that lasts 45 seconds or so, and then you're repeating that, and then you're repeating it again, you're repeating it again, however long you want to play it for. But that repetition, that patterning of music, I think gives you an opportunity to process your emotions in a kind of a special way, really. And to put it in its very, very simplest terms, if you were to play the tune 3 times, and it would probably be more like 6 or 8 times for me, but if you played it 3 times, and you were feeling sad, you might start off playing in a sad mood, trying to make your music sound sad. Perhaps the next time it might be a bit more frustrated or angry or something like that. So you've got a different mood going to the music. I'd say, third time through, it's likely to be much longer than that. But the final time, at least the final time, is a resolution to those feelings. So you've got the three phases, if you like, the phase where you're starting, and the phase where you're expressing something a bit more, and the phase where you're accepting where it is. And I mean, just last year I had something quite difficult going on in life, and I got totally obsessed with a tune which is fairly well known, a tune called Coleman's March. It's an American tune, very wistful, elegiac, sort of, is that the right word? Sort of a tune, and I kind of bent it into the shape I wanted it to be. So I changed it a little bit to suit the chords and the mood that I wanted. But at one period I would play that for maybe 10 minutes, and then I'd go out and do something. About an hour later I'd be back playing that tune again, and I had 2 or 3 days like that where I just had to play that tune all the time through the day. And after that I was in a better place somehow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really felt that it really helped me deal with some things there. At the end of it, I've got a piece of music that I can play to people, but that's kind of incidental, let's say. It was all about the process that I was going through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, some of the early ones never even saw the light of day. I mean, that I do play that tune out now, and I've got a kind of a different style of music. People are like, oh, you know, where's that come from? Well, it's come from a need in me.
Yeah.
It's a private need.
I really value what you've shared there, and what I want to add to it is that I just did a training last week with One World Orchestra, which was absolutely incredible, and it was about kind of working with music in community groups and settled status refugees or people trying to access the sort of asylum system here. That was who they are, but you know, this was all about working with music and community groups, and they went through trauma and how it affects the body and the brain and the sort of psychological, social, kind of biological mechanisms that trauma kind of goes through, and then talking about how music is such a great medicine for all of this because it lights up so many different parts of the brain, and it really tries to unify the brain in terms of and the body because of how it just affects us, you know, biologically. And we talked a lot about polyvagal theory. I don't know if that's something that you've come up against, but with the vagus nerve, it's a vagus meaning travelling, and it connects so much of our, you know, gut right down into our legs. But it's also how we as humans learn to interact, because as we look at expressions on a face, it's that vagus nerve connecting things in our bodies to know, you know, what looks like safety, what looks like fear, what looks like, you know, appetite and hunger and all of those survival things. So it was a really good reminder for me of all of those things that I learnt probably at university when I did science, but also just picking up through therapy in life and, you know, my own reading and interest in psychological function with music, because that's something that I did at one point really geek out on and learnt a lot about. But I think that music provides pattern and it provides rhythm, which another way of doing that to help us through depression and help us through grief is walking and rhythm, and putting steps in our bodies actually has an effect on the pattern of brain waves in the brain. But I think music has that as well, because it's predictable, it's something that is comforting and we're in control of it. So yes, we can go in and change it if we want to, but actually we can just come back and play that thing that we love and know how it works, and just have this little game, this little mechanism that we can return to find peace and calm and expression, outlet. And I think that it's nice to hear how you came back to it throughout the day, as kind of that became the rhythm of the day, is just knowing that you could return to this piece of music and then maybe never play it again. I don't know if you still do, but I certainly have pieces that I've obsessed with because it gave me the distraction of like learning something quite complicated, and once I got it, it was just this soothing, I can do this now, but now it's done,
I don't need to do it again.
Yeah, I don't need to do it. It served its purpose. You know, I don't need to make it into a performance piece, or I don't need to put it on an album. But that's absolutely been a process for me of like knowing what music is suitable for me to put out there, or keep for myself, or teach to students. You know, that's been a real battle at times, just with my own sort of feelings of everything needs to be public now because I'm professional, and but actually no, more and more I'm keeping a lot more things private, which, you know, and that's been a whole journey in itself.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think it's nice that you managed to find music was functional in that way for you, at the times where you needed it.
yeah. I'd say we're very lucky as musicians to
Yeah.
have that in our gift, so we must use it.
The other thing on top of that is sometimes for me it's not even melody, it's just sound. I love how the instrument feels and how it reacts and responds to pressure, and how it also feels to vibrate over these vital organs in our chest. So sometimes I'll just kind of relax with that and just make nice noises, which has led to compositional pieces. And I don't really talk about it anymore, but I have a whole album of music that is poured out of my heart at a really difficult time in my life. So yeah, I did write an album of stuff and put it out there, but I find that more often, like I said, I keep things personal now, but it was important for me to do that as a kind of statement to myself of this stuff's good enough to do an album, and it felt like a statement in itself to do that. But at the time I was writing that music, it was exactly as you described. It was that kind of conscious, unconscious kind of rhythm and pattern of self-soothing, kind of knowing what this is, what am I going through, I don't know what these feelings are, but let's just see where it goes musically and put it into the instrument. And yeah, it's a real lucky thing to have. The last thing I'd like to finish on, because it is a new thing that you are doing at Whitby this year, and I don't know if you're doing it elsewhere, but it really piqued my interest because of your historian knowledge and your research. You've got A Dove Among a Flock of Crows, which is your new show, your personal investigation into women in traditional musicians from the past. Lemmy Brazil. I love one of her tunes. I learnt it in Morris years and years ago. Dolly Curtis, Beatrice Hill. I don't know if would she be appearing? Yes, she does. But yeah, talk to us without giving too much away, because obviously we want people to go and see the show if you're going to Whitby. But can you tell us where this came from and what's involved in the show?
So I was invited to give the Roy Palmer lecture at Whitby. So this is a talk at Whitby, which is now, this is a starting point, not a finishing point, I have to say. But I initially viewed it as a finishing point. It was going to be a lecture at Whitby, and a subject of my choice. I was invited by the Traditional Song Forum, who I've done quite a lot of lectures and presentations for before. And I was thinking about this, that and the other, and I thought it needs to be something kind of hefty, and I couldn't quite work out what to do. And I was tidying up my filing cabinet, and I came across handwritten notes from 1990, from 36 years ago, when I did a combined lecture and workshop at Sidmouth called Women in Traditional Music. And I thought, oh, right, there's my subject, of course, that had really worked around Dolly Curtis, Melodeon player from Suffolk. It was a Melodeon workshop. Sally Sloan, Melodeon player from Australia, and somebody else, the three of them. So I got my notes out and thought, yeah, okay, this is a subject I'd like to give the talk on. So I started looking into it in a bit more detail, doing a bit of scoping out of so on, and I asked everyone I can think of, from the librarian at the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library, all my personal contacts and research. Here's my list of female traditional musicians from, let's say, first half of the 20th century, broadly speaking. Can you add to it? Not many additions were offered. And B, do you know anybody? Do you know of any papers? Do you know of anybody who's done a PhD on this? Are there any publications I should read? I'm talking about England here. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Which is totally shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nobody has studied. Okay, they might have studied women singers. There's lots out there about women folk song collectors, women instrumentalists. Tumbleweed moment.
Wow.
Nothing. So
the only reason,
sorry, short. Oh, sorry, go on.
The only reason we know about them is because their music's been passed, orally in the tradition. Is that the only reason that I know Lemmy Brazil's number 1 and number 2? Because that's all I know of her. And Beatrice Hill's, so it's just because their music's been passed on.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot to investigate here. Why is is absence of evidence? The historian's rule is, evidence of absence is not. No. The historian's rule is absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. I think in this case, there's not much. There wasn't as much going on, but there's a lot to draw out from it. I mean, the list of women musicians I've got now is still only maybe 20 people or so, but it's about 15 or 16 more than most people can name, and a lot of that's my own research into various things, various methods of research. But there's a lot more to be said. I'm comparing it with Ireland, where there's quite a lot more. There were a lot of women concertina players, and particularly in the same period, and looking at Australia as well. So there's some comparative work to do there. But at Whitby, it's really a lecture. I'm not going to be playing any music. Probably not even going to be playing any sound clips, because it's only a 1 hour window and there's actually a lot to say. But as I say, it's the beginning, not the end. I'm presenting the same thing at Durham Folk Festival later in the year, and I actually want to turn that, probably for next year, turn it into a something with live music in it as well.
Yeah.
I've always made a point of playing tunes from Dolly Curtis, Molly Whitaker, who's a dulcimer player, Sally Sloanes. I've always made a bit of a point of playing music from other women, and so I want to turn that into something with live music in it in the future.
Sign me up.
Probably it needs publishing somehow as well.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is this a manuscript that will be turned into a book, or I mean, have you got a website for this particular project?
Not yet. No, it's early days.
Okay.
I'm not quite. I think my feeling is that it needs to be published, possibly a book, but
yeah.
I've done a couple of books and there's such hard work. But it needs to be published in some sort of written format, I think, because I think it is actually quite, it's significant stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely love the idea of it being more of a fleshed out, live music performance with, educational content as well, or some sort of hybrid event, because I think that's really is the celebration and the joy of it is recognizing that there's musicians here, and sign me up. I mean, if you're looking for bands, I'd love to be involved in that. I can't stop thinking of Lucy Wright as the sort of woman who's, for me, sort of like waving a massive flag for and providing a beacon for all of the women who are in research like yourself, but also women folklorists, women musicians, women dancers. Throughout history, I think that there's a real kind of momentum towards shining lights into the dark and trying to find anything that we can that's been recorded in history, which is difficult, but it is there if we look hard enough. And obviously that's something
it really is a needle in a haystack. I mean, I'm looking at women, they're harder to find anyway in any of these things. I'm looking at working class people, I'm looking at music rather than song. All these things mean that the number that the needle is buried further and further in the haystack. So it's really hard, but it doesn't mean there isn't interesting things to say about it.
Yeah. Do you know yet when and where that talk will be, or is it a bit early on in the year?
Know. Okay. I don't know. It's no, Whitby haven't told me which day it is yet.
Okay. No. Well, listeners, you'll have to keep an eye on the Whitby schedule as it gets programmed. But I'm there with Doomsday until Wednesday, so fingers crossed it's in the first half of the week, and then I'll hopefully be able to come and see that. I'm really looking forward to it if I can. I feel that there's so much more that we could talk about, but I'm really glad that we had this opportunity, and that I've been able to ask the questions that I felt for me were the most desirable for me to know and everyone else. But I will leave links to all of your websites. You've got various projects and research threads, as well as your music and your bands. So make sure you check out the show notes. And as Katie has mentioned, we've talked about the Melinar that you will be teaching this evening, but as you are listening to this episode, you'll be able to catch up with that on my Patreon. So if you're interested, check out the link in the description to sign up to my Patreon to access Katie's as well as everyone else's tutorials. The last thing to say is just thank you so much for sharing what you have. I think as I progress with this podcast, it becomes more of a time capsule for me, more of a kind of valuable asset that I feel I'm adding a needle to the haystack of traditional assets, and I'm just really grateful that we've had this conversation, and there's so much more that we can add to the overall Chatterbox offering now. So thank you so much, Casey.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Mel. It's been a pleasure. It's been nice to air some things that I don't always get a chance to talk about.
Yeah, that's also a nice bit of feedback that I'm getting from other professional artists who are listening in, which is like mind-blowing to me that people listen that are professionals. I set it up mainly to sort of talk to my students, but then obviously that it gets bigger and things get talked about that spark more interest. But I think that, yeah, that's the nice thing that is coming back, that it's conversations we don't normally get to hear, and that's really what I'm all about. I'm a nerd for just getting to know people on the levels that they're churning away, you know, in their own life, and you know, you've done so much, so there's so much to talk about. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Chatterbox with Katie and myself, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review if you're on a platform that allows that, make sure it's 5 stars because that's the only thing that the algorithm cares about, and leave a comment down below if you're on YouTube. And yeah, do all the good stuff, share this around. If you can afford to do so, please check out my Patreon and consider supporting me there. But generally just try to make the voice of this podcast go further. If you've enjoyed it, share it with a friend who you think will enjoy it as well. Thank you to everyone again who supports me on Patreon. My guest next month is going to be the fantastic Nick Wiseman-Ellis. He's fresh back from Germany and he's back in the UK. You may not know of him because he hides his light a little bit under the bushel online, but he's getting back into the swing of things and he's playing with a few different lineups, and I'm really excited that I got to nab him for this series. So we get to sit down and chat on the podcast next month, but you can join us live on Zoom for Nick's Melinar tutorial. He is going to be online on the 29th of April at 7 p.m. UK time. I'm actually going to his house because he lives not far from my parents and where I grew up, so that's really lovely, and we're going to be there together, and he is going to be teaching a Melinar on how to evolve a set of tunes and exploring ideas for building simple arrangements, and there's going to be some other technical stuff in there as well. If you're not familiar with Nick's playing, go and Google him. He's absolute technical genius and a really gorgeous tunesmith as well. So we're actually going to be getting to work with one of his own tunes. If you can't make the live, you will be able to get the recording if you sign up to my Patreon, so you can always catch up in your own time. And yeah, definitely you don't want to miss it. Couple of other parish notices from me this month. Next weekend, if you're listening to this in the week that I'm releasing it, the Oxford Folk Festival is coming, and I'm really excited because it's the first festival appearance for my absolutely brilliant Wilkes' Gob Morris. So we will be there all weekend. We're doing the Ceilidh spot on Friday night with the Oakstone Trio. Come and check us out. We're really excited about it. Then we'll also be appearing at Derbyshire Makes. Now this is a festival that's running across the county. I'm involved in multiple ways. The Morris will be there. We've got workshops that we've been working with the local Asperger Society. We've been teaching the Morris dancing, and they're going to be doing a showcase as part of it. And I've also, separately to the Morris, been commissioned to produce a new audio trail for my town of Swadlincote, if you don't know. And I have been interviewing people from the mining community, and I've been putting together this audio map that will be released and launched that weekend. So absolutely come and check it out. It will be available online. I'll be shouting about it on my socials because I've put hours and hours and hours into this. I'm so proud of it. That's on the 25th of April. And excitingly, the 28th of April is my very first Kilnside folk event. That is the Cosmos Chocolat Bal. We're going to be running a French bal folk dance workshop and also an evening of French dance at Swadlincote Town Hall. Tickets are on a sliding scale. Check out the link in the description to get those because they're selling really well. So if you're interested in coming, you definitely want to get those quickly. And then just a couple of things coming up in May if you like to get your diary organised in advance. I've got another stint at the Stables doing a level 1 absolute beginners Melodeon DG. They have things, they have instruments for hire at no extra cost, and that is on May the 23rd. And then very end of May is my first seated concert with Kilnside Folk Events, my brand new Swadlincote initiative to host live music events here. and that is the 29th of May with John Doran and the Northern Assembly. Again, tickets are selling quite well, so please sign up in advance for that. I would really appreciate it. It helps my stress levels as a promoter to kind of neutralise if people buy their tickets in advance, and that goes for anywhere. Every promoter is in the same basket there. So yeah, a few little things going on, and yeah, just finally to say thank you ever so much for listening. Thank you for supporting the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Take care. Bye.